your flaws, they should be your company of choice. We have Pathway Solutions. Pathway Solutions, they do offer, they are a HR consultancy firm that does training via LMS. LMS is Learning Management System. And we thank Sir Frank for always making sure that we have opportunities to our viewers. We also have Panessa Training Institute for those of us who love to work using their hands, either part-time, full-time. They should be your training institute of choice. Panessa Works is a woodwork company located in Nairobi, Kenya, along Mombasa Road. Currently, their August intake is already on. So if you'd wish to be a part of it, get in touch and we'll be able to connect you with them. We have WeClean solution services. WeClean have a machine that can clean your carpet within 6 minutes. They do deliveries within Nairobi, and they can also come to your offices and do the cleaning, both offices and your house. So if you'd wish also to get in touch with WeClean services, we can always help you be in touch with them. We have Suluhu Mediation Center. Suluhu Mediation Center, they offer certification in mediation services. They have flexible classes. They have both virtual, physical, Saturday, and LMS system as well. So if you'd wish to get a mediation certificate, Suluhu Mediation Center should be your institution of choice. We have Kapula Mintito. Kapula Mintito offer Mapochopocho from Kenyan coastal region. They have Mabuyu, they have Kadasha. So if you love these Mapochopocho and you don't have, or you don't have access to them, they also do deliveries. You can always get in touch and we'll be able to link you up so that you can get your Mapochopocho in time wherever you are. We have Profiles International. Profile International is the only institution that offers a GENOS, that is Emotional Intelligence Certification. They do psychometric test, and actually this coming Saturday, as you're going to see in the flag, this coming Monday on the 28th, sorry, they have a training, a free training that if you have an opportunity, you should be able to attend and also get to learn from them. They also have an offer for the DISC personality test. That is for all our viewers. If you wish to do your DISC personality test, kindly, we will be very happy to connect you with them. We have Elsa Mea. Elsa Mea is a hotel located in Naivasha. Their ambience, their food, and the rates they offer, believe you me, it's out of this world. We have SN Park Limited and Steadfast Quality Solutions. Steadfast Quality Solutions is they are our HR and PR consultants in Uganda. And we thank Herbert Zake for always making sure that from Uganda, we are accessible and we are able to reach a great number of people. We also have, last but not least, Labor Planet. Labor Planet, as the name suggests, is a human capital and HR firm. They also help with human resources work. As I had mentioned, we have Profiles International have a masterclass on developing a cohesive team. This one is a free webinar that is going to happen on the 28th, this coming Monday, from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30. And as you can see, we have a very, very great team that is going to offer this training. Today's topic is brought to us by none other than David Mutaka. David Mutaka is going to guide us through developing a human resource strategy. As we spoke last week, many of us had questions. Many team leaders had questions on how to develop a human resource strategy within our workspaces. I'll give this opportunity, therefore, to Mr. David Mutaka, who is the head of people and culture at Stanbic Bank Uganda, to guide us through. Mr. David, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Good evening. How are you doing?
We are doing great. We are doing great. How are you?
Just confirming that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity to be on this great platform. And thank you to Grace and your team. I think what you do is commendable in terms of just developing skills and creating networks. So it's a real privilege and honor for me to be here. As you've said, my name is David Mutaka. I've been practicing HR, what we call people and culture at Stanbic for close to, I want to say 20 years. But in Stanbic, just over 13 years, and in this role as the head of people and culture for the last 3 years. Just to get people to know me on the call, and Grace was saying, I played rugby at some point for Uganda. I coached, I still love the sport, and it has defined a lot of who I am. I'm a dad to 3 almost teenagers, and also married to 1 wife who is female. So important to just put that out.
Emphasis.
Yes. So it's a real privilege to be sharing. And the topic chosen is not a simple one. When I Googled strategy, just to say how many definitions of strategy, it came up with about 396 million definitions of strategy. So you can imagine trying to package that into something that people can understand, people can listen to and associate with. So my context, I think for me, is to speak to any HR leaders there or any people who are emerging in the field of human resources and say to you, from my own lessons and what I've seen in the last 15 years and maybe the last 3 years as it has evolved, how does that come about? I have some slides as well, and those are really to just help us frame the conversation. I'll try and go through those quite quickly, also just for note taking if you find it valuable, and I'll share it with you, Kevin, once we're done with the call, and maybe you can share. I'll head into it, just confirming that I'm still on.
Yeah, you're still on, and we can hear you.
Okay.
Great.
Cool. So this is where I started my thinking, and just confirm that you can see my slides.
Not yet. Please share. Click on the share button and then click on the screen to be shared.
Okay. Let me see. Share. Oh, yes, here it is.
Perfect. Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, I'm too used to Teams, so you'll forgive me. Zoom does totally me sometimes. So yeah, I thought I'd start here. And why here? I think in the context of a HR professional, sometimes you struggle with your own identity. Why do I exist? It's a topic almost everyone has an opinion on. And depending on where you are, some of your leaders, some business owners seem to understand this better. And I think I like this definition because it sort of says, why do you exist? And this is Dave Ulrich, one of the people that one of the leading teachers on this profession and maybe business speakers on this, and says the most important thing leaders and HR professionals deliver to an employee is an organization that wins in the market, in its marketplace. Because sometimes you get it confused and say, do I want to pay salaries, have big pay? Do I want to be the place where people are happiest? Do I want to be a place where we are known? What is it that you can make a difference? And I think for me, if you deliver an organization that wins in the marketplace, then in return, people's lives also change, whatever it is they want as their aspirations. Because organizations, in my mind, have the capability or the resources to make such great change, both in their communities and also for people who work in them. And it's important that organizations win in the marketplace. So as a HR professional, I think for me, if you can create an environment or an organization that wins in the marketplace, then the results is what happens to your people, to your stakeholders. And that's why I think this is a very important quote. So the next piece I thought of touched on is to say, what is strategy? And as I said, there are about 400 million definitions. So this is just one of many, but one that I like. And the author is Roger L. Martin, and he's written a book on how to play and win on strategy. It's a very good book on strategy. And I think what I like about it is it is simple and it is also straightforward. So it's not a long planning document. It's a set of interrelated and powerful choices that positions the organization to win. So whether that is, if you are an MBA student and you have many better ones, I think we can discuss maybe afterwards or whatever, but I think interrelated and powerful choices that differentiate you from the market and position you to win. And that's sort of, if we take that as a working definition, how do we then move forward? So how do we make powerful choices? And that's my next slide. I think when you think about this from starting with outcomes from right to left, the first set of responses or choices is something happens. Let's say you say your sales are dropping. You react. You say, look, we need to fire a few salespeople. Your sales are dropping. We need to do more training. Your sales are dropping. HR is not doing their job. And the actions is the first stage of thinking. You react. You sort of take an in-the-moment tactical response and say, look, how we'll increase our sales is X. Or maybe our customer service has gotten better. How do you react? And that's the first stage of decision-making. The second stage is to sort of say, but what are the underlying assumptions that cause us to do this? How did we organize ourselves that we have only 10 salespeople? What are the systems, programs, rules, performance metrics, and how are those influencing the action we took and hence the outcomes we have? And I think that's the second stage of decision-making, and you'll see those. Now, strategy in my mind and the next stage of decision-making is the triple loop learning. And this is a framework borrowed from Chris Gairis, and he talks about triple loop learning. And I think why it's important for me, again, for professionals like ourselves, is how do we think about how we solve problems. Now, triple loop learning says, I've seen the action, I've framed it, but am I understanding the context? Am I understanding the real change I'm trying to make here? And it talks about transforming. So it starts with your why. Why now? Or why am I existing? What do I really want to have as an impact? Why am I here? Which comes to your vision. So your mission. And what would I like to see happen? Your vision. What do I truly believe in? What's the difference I'm trying to make? And that will then talk to your culture, your agreements, your policies. And you now start to think beyond just internally to externally to say, what does the marketplace need? What do my stakeholders need? And I think that's where you start thinking, if you're thinking strategy, that's where it is. It's much longer term. I know these days things change quickly, but it's almost saying, no matter what the sequencing is, there are some things that always keep me in focus and bring me back to my true north. So at that triple loop learning, and you can use this for your strategy, but also even for your day-to-day problems that you sort of seem to have, where you have quite a number of symptoms. Maybe you have 100 symptoms, and those symptoms will probably be affected by a few patterns, much fewer patterns. And then there'll be the real drivers, which are the real underlying. If you think about the iceberg theory, whereas what you see is here, the real things that drive it are few, and and if you change those and then affect the next, then what you see outwards changes. So that's in terms of thinking about choices. If I move to the next slide, it sort of says, having thought of the choices, what are some of the things that you can think about? Because again, we spoke about context, which is your external. You think about your competition, you think about your customers, you think about your shareholders, and all those who you affect. So the first question you'd ask yourself, does your strategy fit within what's going on in the environment, right? So is there profit? Is it aligned with your key success factors in your chosen environment? Does it exploit your key resources, what you're good at? Can you pursue this strategy more economical than your competitors? And this reminds me of when I coached the rugby team. I coached the women's rugby team a long time ago, and we went to the World Cup in 2009. And apart from, one of the things I learned, apart from realizing that I was the biggest liability on my team, because the other coaches had, real big team panels, they had analysts, I was there with just an assistant. I didn't know too much about the sport. One of the coaches told me that, look, I've watched you coaching, and one of the things I want to say to you that you can take away is coach the team you have. Don't coach the team you wish you had, right? So what team do you have? So what resources do you really have, and how do you match those? Will it differentiate you and sustain you, or is it easily copied? Are the elements of your strategy internally consistent, right? So the choices you've made, and this is copied from the strategy diamond, for those of you who want to read on, where you will play, how you will deliver it, how you will differentiate yourself, how you will sequence it, and what economic logic it leads to, whether it's low cost, whether it is premium, and do they fit together, and do they mutually reinforce each other? Do you have enough resources to pursue this strategy, whether that's money, time, talent? And I think why I put this particular slide is I currently work in a very large organization, probably have more resources than many other organizations, but there are people starting in a small organization, or maybe just even starting your own business. These same questions still apply. So instead of saying I have to be like this big organization, say, instead of being a Goliath, if I'm going to be a David, what are my resources? Is it the small stones, or is it the shield? What are those things that I'll use? Are you not spreading yourself too thin in the, trying to fit others? As I said, coach the team you have, use the resources you have. And then if you think about implementation, how will you implement it? Can your organization transition through them? And I think if you ask yourself these questions, they start to tell you whether you have a strategy. And whereas the word strategy, as I said, is overused, whatever it is that you have on paper around the choices you've made for your organization, you can even test it using these same questions. Now, for myself, please, Kevin, keep me honest on time so that we don't lose the question time. As I think about it, sitting in my chair, how I think about this, and how I get to, just really a micro level. Why do I exist as HR, right? We said we want to create an organization that wins in the marketplace. And what's the marketplace? The marketplace, let's say, is Uganda. We are in banking. What are the things that are affecting banking? Technology is changing. The customer is more demanding, perpetually dissatisfied. The risk environment is even more hostile. Fraudsters are getting sharper. The fintechs are taking over. Now, in all that context, my competitor has changed. I need to think about, with all that noise, staff, employees are thinking different, or people are different. The regulator is thinking differently. Government wants to increase household incomes. How do I think about all those things? And how do I frame them into what problem am I trying to solve, given what my context is? And what is the downside? What is the upside or payoff of what I've chosen? Am I seeing the full picture? These are things I'm asking myself in my head. And then, having thought about the problem I'm trying to solve, what elements am I working with? What are my tools? So am I in a very technologically enabled environment? how strong is my team? What resources do I have? Do I have budgets or not? Am I automated? Am I in a manual environment? What are my own strengths and capabilities as a leader? What do I bring to this role? Will I be a champion? Am I credible as an activist? Do I have strong communication skills? And what do I then say? With those resources, what should be my approach? Or how do I sequence the things I need to sequence? And one of the things that I sort of have for myself or have learned, and it's not a universal truth, I think up to 90% of the things you try and do should be the things that you've tried and tested, the things that are putting bread on the table, right? Too many times we rush into innovation, we rush into new ideas and forget what has brought us to where we are. We are quick to discard the old and say, no, now this is a new trending thing. But if you sort of start working with the base that you have that gives you the license to try new things, then you sort of think about what's the 10% to innovate. Maybe that can go to 80-20. For me, it's a bit more conservative. And maybe it's because of the nature of the organization I'm in. If maybe I was really a startup, it would be the reverse, because I don't have enough history to maybe build on what I'm doing. But I think what you've done in the past buys you credibility or gives you a license to operate and try new things. And having seen that approach, what will I measure as my metrics, as things that come back? Do they tie back to the problem I'm trying to solve? Do they tie back to my approach? Do they tie back to my resources and tools? And do they then tie back to what I think my contribution is? And while the arrows are both sided, I don't think there's any place to start. It can go either way. And both things sort of say, am I measuring the right thing? Hence, do I change my approach, or is it vice versa? What's broken? And I think it's a continuous process that sort of say, what do I tweak and what do I go about it? So I thought I'd bring a practical example just to land it. And if I think about HR, I think the slide that I'm sharing is a sort of a conceptual framework of how you sort of would land this and say, if you think about the people journey and the moments of truth from attraction post-exit, how are you attracting people? What's your brand? What are you selling them? You know, maybe we are the newest, most shiny company that's going to transform Africa. Maybe we are, you know, you will learn a lot, you will, you know, whatever it is, that brand. And that's why I think for me, winning in the market is so important. That brand that you sort of put out there that says, come. Maybe we have great leaders. Maybe we are doing very creative things. Maybe our environment is so cool. And then how do we recruit? What's the cost of recruitment? Do we use LinkedIn? Do we use partners like Atara? Do we use the papers? You know, and what's that experience like? And understanding that all these tie to each other, because and that's why the great employee experience is across. Every piece of that journey affects a human being. And how that human being tells another affects the rest. So across that value chain, you're thinking, how good is my employee experience? Your aspiration is really to create a great employee experience. So before they join you, what are you doing? How are you helping them land in a way that they will be active on day one? They'll understand, they'll answer as many questions as possible. They'll know how to navigate. You know, before when they come in, they find a ready, you know, a ready work environment, whatever that is, whether it's a car, it's the desk, it's a laptop, or whatever it is that you're using. It's, you know, the portal or the field. And then how do you integrate them into what already exists? How do you define performance? And a lot of that has to do with organizational culture and alignment. How will they develop? How do you skill? So I was asking someone today, how do you learn? Is it online? Is it on the job? Do we have things we must know before we start? You know, licenses to operate, whether it's very technical or quite loose. Do we have mentors? How do we think about development? And then how will I grow, which is what I call progression. My next 2 to 3 years, what do those look like? And then beyond that, if I choose to leave, how do we offboard? And then post-exit, do we continue to create an alumni or customers who work for us? So that's really the employee journey. Now, if you think about that employee journey and say, given that employee journey and where I am in my context, whether I am a startup or an organization that's like ours, 160 years old, and it's quite strong in the market, what are those things you think about? And in my mind, having thought about that, and if you think about the things that we've said before, and say, if we think at the level of context and the triple loop, what are the themes that are emerging for us, right? And so across that journey, are we creating a great employee experience? And if we are not, how do we aspire to that? Along that employee experience, are we creating an organization or a culture that sort of fuses to link to what the organization wants, to whether it is for us to be really competitive, really creative, or really customer-centric? What are the things we are doing that will drive that organizational culture and alignment? Culture and leaders, you can't be separated, right? So the leaders drive the culture. And I think if I think about my chief executive, she says leadership is the number one transformation tool. Someone else says nothing happens naturally apart from chaos, friction, and something else without leadership. So leadership, how effective are your leaders? Who are your leaders? Are they one or two? If you think about some of the great organizations that offer great service, you'll almost see there's someone who makes the decision that says, what are these? There's someone who creates more leaders and says, all of us are leaders. And that element sort of says whether that leadership is in a human being or it's a capability spread across, that says things are clear, how we choose, I think affects the culture quite significantly, and hence a theme that I'd think about. And then finally, am I keeping my good people, right? So across all these things, it's great to have a great employee experience, but if the people are continuing, to leave when you train them, then you can't sustain, you can't do the long term. And hence retention, especially with good people, is a big part of how you continue to perform for today and continue to win in the marketplace for tomorrow. So having thought about those as themes, as an example, as 4 themes, the next thing is around priorities, what you want to affect on the stakeholders. For example, for customers, what do you want for them? What would be the employee experience? How would you define it? And an example is we've been doing some visits into the branches and or the front line. And some of the things that we've discovered is some of the things we measure, maybe like how many accounts are opened, may not necessarily drive customer experience. So someone is about how many accounts were opened today. The customer values the conversation more than the accounts opened. The customer may value speed over that. The customer may value personalization over the account opened. So how do you make sure that those things are not lost for the customer? And if some of those things. For the employee, what do they find value in? Where are they in their life cycle? If they are, in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, what does that look like? If they are male, female, if they are managers of managers, or if they are starting out in their career, what do they want from the organization? How do they see their fit tied to your organization? Then the franchise itself, the organization you're building, how are you serving it? And how are you building systems and structures that allow it to be a nice, tangible or intangible asset? And one of the things I tell people is, if you are to sell it now, if you say, look, this is my organization and I want to put it on the market, how much money would you get for it? So your ability to continue to improve, repeat what you're doing, to differentiate, to make it unique, and then say scale it is a key part that people, sometimes don't see how we're adding value to this organization. Tomorrow, will it be, if I think about the share price, will it be more valuable, right? The shareholders, our dividends, our profitability, very important part. The environment, social and governance, right? As I said, the government, for example, in Uganda, and Kevin, you're in Kenya, I don't know what the new government is pushing, but for Uganda, one of the things that is part of the NPA, or National Planning Authority's mandate, NPA 3, is to increase household income. How are you doing that in your environment? Are you creating jobs? Are you creating meaningful work? Are you affecting your customers better socially? Are you doing things that do not hurt the environment? And if you think about governance, are you acting in an ethical manner, in a way that you're not abusing power? So are all those things tied together? I think for me, they start to define your priorities, because each of those stakeholders has a value point and within a set time limit. So what should be your priority in this moment that then talks to the key themes that you're talking about up there? I think, again, thinking choices, it starts to sort of narrow down to say, these are the priorities I'm focusing on. But one of the questions that people ask, you're doing that so that what, right? I'm doing this so that the employee experience improves and the employee experience affects the customer experience. I'm doing this so that, everyone has an aligned focus and understands that they find their work easy to do. There's transparency, there's a common understanding, it removes intrigue, there's, psychological safety. Why are we doing that? We're trying to improve our leadership effectiveness. And so that's the linkage. Sometimes you sort of say, why are you doing this? So you're doing this so that what, right? I think that's a good question. So you're doing it so that what? What will change? And that takes me to my last slide. So if I think about the things I've spoken about and say, if you look at those metrics, and I've called them key performance indicators, let's call them possible, possible data points that you'd say, if I look at my head count, my customer score, however I measure that, how much money I'm making in terms of revenue, my staff costs, whether those are in, my risks and what I'm losing, my profit after tax, if I'm thinking about shareholder value. What are some of the things that we're thinking about that might affect that? So if I think about headcount, and as many of the people in HR will know, it's a hot topic. When headcount grows, shareholders, managers get nervous, right? So when you think about headcount, how aligned is it to your priority areas, your biggest areas of impact, the places that drive real value? Is it allocated to where maybe you see areas of growth? How will you close resourcing gaps around that? How do you think about maybe where you should transfer some resources? Are your best people in the right places? And I think for me, that's where you start to sort of say, based on that, what decisions should I make? If you think about your customer score, which you call the Net Promoter Score, or your customer experience, customer service index, what does it look like? Does it link to your employee experience? Someone said your customer experience cannot exceed your employee experience. So if your employee experience is not as good, your customer experience is probably going to suffer. And some of the things that will affect that is, first of all, how engaged your employees are in terms of your employee Net Promoter Score, the skills and capabilities they have, and also the culture that you have. What sort of culture are you building? Are they empowered? Are there systems? Are there processes? Are leaders modeling it? Or are leaders chasing, different things? If you think about revenue and link it back to staff productivity, how much are staff producing? So if you think about revenue per staff as a number, are leaders effectively seeing that and saying, based on the team, are we winning and losing? How am I moving people around? How am I seeing people who need help? How am I seeing where my new people are? Are they clear? And so that starts to tell you from tactics to assumptions, again, going back to say, maybe it's a new team and we should give it time. And this will take about a year to turn around. If I think about staff costs and whether they're growing, if they are growing, how do you explain them? Are you driving engagement? Are you creating clarity? Are you building a great employee experience? So hence we've invested in technology, we've invested maybe in rewards, we've invested in new benefits, and we expect that this will drive our Net Promoter Score, which should drive our customer score. If I think about the risk environment and losses, your culture, your alignment, how are people behaving? Are you able to monitor that? Are people abusing power? Is there, are people speaking up? Are leaders modeling? And hence what, some of the things that are emerging there and what could you do about it? And then, of course, finally, shareholder value, profit after tax, that drives dividends. So what's your performance management like? And that's a conversation we can have. Does it work? Is it something you should change? Is it automated? Is it manual? Do people understand it? Is it fair? Is it transparent? I don't know. And then, of course, you'd almost have an indicator if you're talking to your shareholders or to people and say, where are we? Have we moved? We like colors in banking, red, amber, green. And it's to say, if it's red, you're in trouble and we need to move it forward. If it's amber, we're making progress and we can move forward. If it's green, let's keep going on that. Let's count on that strength and maybe see where else it can help us do these things. And whereas I've put them in separate lines, a lot of these things are interlinked. And that's why the definition of an integrated set of powerful choices, right? So what are you choosing? And I think for me, that starts to define your strategy. And this is how you then demonstrate or check back again. If you look at the metrics and say, are these things giving me the results I wanted? Who do I need on the team? Who do I need to collaborate with? Where do I need to do more advocacy? Who do I need to bring into the picture? Because you can't win alone. Who are my partners? And I think, Kevin, I'll pause there so that we can have a conversation.
David, I have a question. This is really, really quite interesting. This is Grace. And
yes,
you guys, we need to have a conversation with you physically. You need to teach our people some of these things. But now I'm wondering, the people in SME and the people who even organizations don't have a business strategy. As been hired as a new HR professional, what are the, how do you even start? Because some of these places don't even have performance management. Heck, they don't even know how many staff they have. They only know that they pay people. So how do people in SMEs or in places where they don't have a business strategy actually maneuver their way around creating an HR strategy?
Okay. As I said, I think for me, the first thing is to say, is this organization going to win in this marketplace? If you speak to the founder or the owner of this SME, they know their secret sauce, right? We prepare juice, we deliver it like this. This is how we market it, right? And it's to ask those same questions. How do you deliver the juice? Could you do it cheaper, right? Who is the person who helps deliver this juice? Does it matter if they, some people have borders in Uganda are quite popular. So there's a border guy who delivers like a problem. Can you keep him? Is he consistent? Do you need to even hire him or not? Because again, you have to act within your own resources. So I'd say just being able to articulate that strategy on a slide to say, we prepare this product. This is how we prepare it. Currently, we sell it to 10 customers. In the next 5 years, we want to be able to go to maybe 5,000 customers. Will we be able to take it to 5,000 customers? Is it a place where people will also start making other juice? And hence, so thinking about where we are now and where we want to go, what are the things that will take us there, right? Will we need to automate? I can no longer make the juice in the kitchen at home. I'll need to make it maybe at a premises. Can I afford the rent? How will I fund it? And I think just understanding that from how do we prepare or how do we make our current product, right? And I thought about thinking about a business model strategy, business model canvas. For those of you who are out there, just think about how do we prepare the product? What do our customers want as our value? What's the value we deliver? It's juice, it's fresh, it's made daily. What do your customers look like? Are they repeat? Are they one-offs? Do you have some repeats and one-offs? Do you need to hawk it or do you have shops? And who are the people who helps you make those sales contracts? Who is the chef who's making the juice? Or maybe is it the person who buys the fruits? That's the most important. It starts to define where your critical roles are, your critical capabilities are. And I know, again, I'm using big words for SMEs. What you do well. What are those things you do really well? And if you can repeat those and consistently choose those, because even just by starting an SME, you've made some great choices. So how do we make sure that those choices are good for today and good for tomorrow? So it's really just detailing that and then saying, what pieces of this puzzle do I need help on? And hence, instead of maybe hiring a full-time HR person, can I get support on maybe thinking through what should be my branding on what I tell employees or potential partners around my business, right? How do I market it? How do I scale it? And I think if you think about some of those things, then we can have a broader conversation around HR fitting into this. I think for me, the first place is to say, is the organization winning in its marketplace? If it is, how do we sustain that? If it needs to scale, again, same thing. But in my mind, you start with the organization, then come to the HR strategy. If it's a one-man show, there's a risk of, if the one man is knocked, so are we thinking succession, right? Whether that is the son, whether that is the daughter, or that is, yeah. So those are the things I would say broadly, but it's an important question.
Oh, okay. Amazing. And I think that would lead us to the second question that has been asked by one Winnie Kiongo. You've mentioned that, and we all know that HR as a unit depends on the human capital within an organization. And that is besides the organization having its own strategy. So how do we ensure, or as HR, do we ensure that an organization strategy addresses employees as a key resource? Back to you, David.
Sorry, just say that again. It was a bit long.
How do we ensure, I was just trying to bring clarity on it, but how do we generally ensure that HR within an organization that is considering the organization strategy addresses employee as a key resource?
Yeah. Yes, and I think, how do you ensure, address employee as a key resource? And if I'm hearing that right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a number of times the employee piece, you almost have all these stakeholders, and if you don't treat them all at the same level, especially in the new world, one of them starts to suffer. If you don't treat your customers right, they leave you. If you don't treat your employees right, they leave you. If you don't treat your shareholders right, they stop investing. If you don't treat your environment right, again, the world suffers. So you have to think about all these and say, how do we create a mix together where they all add value to each other, right? Where if you come in like a union member, say employees have rights, they must get demands, you'll struggle, right? It has to be a case of, like I showed on that last slide, how does employee engagement drive productivity? What are our customers looking for, and how do employees help deliver it? What are some of the things we can change and shift? What are our employee capability, and how can we link it to each of those stakeholder groups, whether it's customer, whether it's shareholder, whether it's the franchise itself, right? Because if we sort of say we are developers of technology, if your coders leave you, you're in trouble. If you don't consider that in the short term, a lot of us think short term, but in the longer term, then it starts to struggle. So in my mind, as I said, and I said, sometimes you think you're acting in the immediate, this is the outcome, I react. What are the assumptions we've made? What's the context we are dealing with, right? And if you think about those three areas, HR has to build a business case. It's not enough to just scream and shout and say human rights matter. They do matter. But so do customers' rights. So do shareholder rights. So why must we focus? And building that business case that says, for every new employee we hire and give them training and allow them to give us feedback, we cut our losses by X, we grow our customer experience by Y, we grow our revenue by Z, right? Hiring in this market is difficult. So retention is important. Where should we pay them, right? Should we pay below market? Should we pay at market? Should we pay above market, right? What is our total composition? And so having these continued conversations turn business owners around and also let them think about not just now, but in 2 to 3 years, in 5 to 10 years, the legacy they want to leave. Will this be an organization that will be here 50 years from now? Will a business that, you know, my family will, or my kids and my grandchildren will continue to see? I think building that business case is the number one thing that can support you as a HR professional, not just strong voicing passionate opinions. And so we can walk through sort of saying, what are the interrelated parts? And it's almost linked to the SME question. If you don't understand the organization really well, you can't see how each component adds value to the other. Right? Yeah.
Great. I believe that question has been clearly answered. On to the next question. Having mentioned that as HRs, we need to understand the organization, where it's going, and just to find a way of bringing the stakeholders, employees, and also the business strategy in line. How then do we as HRs, or even managers who are playing the HR role, that is for those big organizations, make sure, or how do they ensure that both the business strategy and the HR strategy align?
Yeah.
Back to you, David.
Sure. So how do the strategies align, right?
Yes.
So it's understanding, how do we make money? Or why are we here? Even before how we make money, I think for me, it starts with, why are we here? Right? Why do we exist? And whereas more sophisticated organizations have written their purposes, mission statements on paper, when you go and check that against what they're doing, you find some disconnectedness. If you can answer the question, why do we exist? Then we can always come back. You say, just like going to a forest. If you get lost, how do you come back to your true north? Why do we exist? Who are our customers? What will happen will they miss us if we're not here? Because then that also defines your money-making model, right? If it is not clear how you're making money, or how you continue to exist, or how you continue to do that, then that affects it. If you're an NGO, how do you add value to your funders, as an example? Does your mission address the need? And are you able to answer that on an ongoing basis? Now, what do you have as your component parts to deliver this value? Whether it is technology, whether it's processes, whether it's systems. Now, having seen that as maybe a baseline, how do people fit into this picture? And that's where your HR strategy starts. So just the alignment of that to say, first and foremost, look, maybe everything is automated. We actually don't need people, right? Or if it is so manual, where do we need people? And if you also have people and it is so manual, does it make it a fun place to work? Or is it a place that is too difficult that I can't attract good people? So how do we automate it? So the HR strategy starts to define from skills. What skills do we need to win in this place? And skills turn into capabilities, which turn into roles, which you then define as jobs. So having seen the skills, which jobs do we really need? Which are those jobs that are core for us? Which jobs are not? Maybe we can even outsource, or we can bring in casual workers every once in a while because they're not core to us. And these decisions are very important decisions. You don't just do them on a whim. And based on those traces, who would be the best person to use? Is it cost effective? And again, going back to things like reward, you start thinking about, how do we pay them? Having brought them on board, again, along that value chain, how do we recruit them? We've recruited them. How do they understand what we do in terms of our culture, in terms of our onboarding, our alignment, because the more they understand what we do, the more they give us, right? The more they stay, the more they feel like part owners of the business. They want growth, and no human being wants to be stagnant. So how will we deliver that growth? Is it through promotions? Is it through skills? Is it through money? Is it through shares? How will we reward, at the point of exit, how long do we keep them? How do we contract? Is it full-time and permanent and pensionable? Is it for 1 year? Is it for 3-year contracts? How do we incentivize the behavior we want? And I think those are the things that we're speaking to. If you think about across that value chain, is the employee experience great? It doesn't have to be rich, but is it great? Is it simple to understand? Do we think about how the culture comes together? Do we think about then how do leaders lead here? And how do they come back? And then the last one is how do we retain them? So the HR strategy starts to build itself around what the business is trying to achieve. And you may not have it on paper on day one, but once you sort of studying and going along and saying, this is important, we've learned this, the data tells us that. And that's why the importance of collecting data. What does the data tell us? And then you start to build your strategy.
Great feedback from David there. Now, having mentioned about how to just influence and make sure that the whole team, that is from HR, supervisors, and everyone within the work ecosystem understands both the business and the HR strategy. How then do we get to influence our supervisors to make sure that the desired employee experience has been promoted?
Right. So how do we influence our managers? I think
yes,
in many of the times, our managers know. Right? Our managers know. They are not from hell, at least majority of them. They are not the devil's cousins. They know. But someone gave an example and said, it's like for those who climb mountains, when you're climbing the mountain, if you worry that you'll not get to the top, you start to become selfish, right? You panic. When the pressure comes on, you panic. And it's sort of say, how do we enable them? First of all, from being clear around how we do what we do and saying we think people are important. They're not important for importance sake. They deliver what we give our customers. So no matter how much pressure comes up, we can never start thinking about ourselves, right? It's like when you're sort of running out of breath or when you're hungry, you find that you start to behave differently. So the idea of, first of all, articulating what we see as our people agenda. Why do we think people are important? What do leaders bring? Leaders bring clarity in terms of the strategy, how they lead the people in terms of clarity and making sure we have alignment, and then also how they demonstrate that, right? So sometimes you want to be command and control, you don't have the patience, again, you're panicking that you won't reach the top. So how do we create environments? Because our leaders are also led by other leaders. So across that value chain, in my mind, which leader groups do you need to start with? What we've done, for example, at Stanbic, there's an intervention per layer. So what do we do with our country leadership team? What do we do with the number twos and those micro teams? What do we do with, maybe branch managers? What do we do for supervisors and leaders? And how do we make sure that this value chain works, right? And I don't know how big the organization is or how small it is to understand that, look, this is what happens. Secondly, skills, right? So what's the number one in an increasingly human world? I think conversations are highly underrated. Do we listen to understand? Do we speak in a way that is not equivocal, that is clear? Do we observe to see, do we model behavior beyond just communicating with our mouths? And I think a few of these skills don't come natural to us. So I was telling someone, some of us who went to schools like Namiliango, half the time you are hustling, you are fumbling. It's how you are raised. And you need some skills that say, this is how we behave here. This is how you greet people. This is how you show respect, right? This is how you demonstrate X. Do we have tools and systems that say, this is an enabling tool, right? So it's not just to wish it, build it in. And if you look at that, if I think about that, Chris Agaris 3-loop learning, you start thinking about what are your processes, what are your systems, what do we repeat, how often do we repeat it, what do we punish? You know, I think for me that you start to sequence it that way, from intent to application.
Great. Just if you allow, let me remind us that this session is brought to us by Stallion Construction Company, Pathway Solution Services, Panessa Training Institute, Weekly Sulu Mediation Center, Kapula Mentito Profile International, Steadfast Quality Solution Limited, SN Park El Samaya, and Labor Planet. Mr. David, this question on strategy is really deep and broad to some extent, because as you've mentioned about communication has been underrated, and many institutions, many organizations don't actually engage and make sure that their employees are informed. As HR, how then do we get to communicate about HR initiatives and changes to our employees and to our staff in general?
Okay. If there's an area I'm struggling, it is that one, right? In the spirit of transparency, right? So communication is hard, because just getting the things done is an effort in itself. And sometimes you talk about it and then don't do it. So the balance is really, really hard. I think, and hence I'm admitting that I'm not the best person to answer this question, but I'll give it a try. I think, one, building routines around when do we communicate, what do we communicate, who do we use to communicate, what do they communicate, right? So your chief executive or your founder, if you have, is a very great source of influence. Your influencers communicate a lot, you know, they're the ones who talk around the water cooler. Do you know them? If you have, a written format, when do you send it? What are the best times to do that? What are things that people will read? Do you have a social media plan? The young people these days don't want anything beyond 40 words. So if you write speeches, they don't read them. What are the things that they must know? So for example, for us in banks, compliance and regulation can lose your license. So it's not optional knowledge. You must know it, you must do it. We will repeat it, we will say it, we won't compromise on it, right? And you must know your non-negotiables, and those must be out there daily, weekly, whatever. Your values, again, if you think about your culture, your values must be everywhere. They must be repeatable, they must be demonstrable, and things like that. So I think for me, the challenge being maybe in terms of just building a structure around it. And again, if I think across that, say from the top, why are we here? Do we communicate it? What are we doing? Do we communicate it? How do we do it? Do we communicate it? Do we communicate success? Do we communicate where we failed? Do we celebrate winners? Do we, communicate who have not done too well? Do we live what we say? I think that's the biggest communication. A lot of the time we say things, but employees are watching us and they know that you're lying, right? Because they saw the manager who did this and you did nothing, right? You didn't have the courage to do it. Some of those things, I think, for me, are the ones that that really make a difference. But as I said, it's one of those that I'm struggling with. If there's anyone out there who has some ideas, plans, I'm open.
Maybe Grace might be having something for us as we yeah, as we wait for her to comment on that. There is a question here that has really been asked by a number of people. In an organization where the payroll is high, and this one actually comes to in those organizations, maybe SMEs where you'll find the board of directors or even the top most directors are the ones who have most say in terms of hiring and so on and so forth. How then do we manage stakeholders who employ high cost experts? Because you'll find that then it becomes a problem to maintain the experts. Yes.
Yeah. I'd go back to your staff costs and say, can I tie them back to, we talk about revenue per staff, but there are many productivity measures. So we may have some experts where it is the only man who can operate the machine. If you think about the oil and gas that we're trying to refine in Tilenga right now, no Ugandan can do it. So it will cost us that. But we have to understand that as they come in, do they start to pass on skills so that we can make it sustainable? I think many problems in HR we try to solve on the day, right? We have a high cost employee, solve it tomorrow. Yeah, there are many linked things. So maybe the skills are scarce, but if they are not scarce, we must start to demonstrate. And I think for me, that's where, if you're going to go to a forum, how do you start to highlight your burning spots? And if I could share that last slide, in terms of thinking about the things that you want to talk about, why must you speak? Because sometimes you say we want a seat at the table, and at the table we will speak. But if you sort of say, if these fires that I put here, if these are our hotspots, our headcount is high. Why is it high? I think, look, this is what's happening. Maybe our staff costs are running out of hand, right? If I look at the staff costs, 50% are driven by these two people, right? Our productivity is dropping. If I look at our revenue sales, or we have not been able to deliver on our contracts and projects that we're supposed to deliver on. So what's the point of paying for this cost, right? How do you get them to do more? How do you share with them the numbers themselves, right? So I think there are many influence levers, and the ability to stay composed and not personalize it. I think sometimes we get to, it's almost like when you've been in an abusive relationship or a racial situation. Every time you see a white person, or if you're black and white, you sort of lose it. But the ability to stay balanced so that you communicate powerfully. You use data. You find out, again, why did we start this company? How do we reinforce that message? What were our dreams? Are we still achieving those? And the ability to step back and tell that story and say, look, over time, can I change it? And that's why strategy is not for today. If you're thinking about tactics, that's not strategy. It helps strategy, but it is, again, if I go back to this slide, it's here, right? So single loop, you're reacting. You're responding to just today's thing. This happened, I found out, I want to solve it. You have to think about what have you done in the past that has led you to this situation. And then going back to the state of where did we start and what did we think about? And being able to articulate that will enable you to shift that over time. Hopefully the organization does not die before you get there. Sometimes organizations need to die, and you also need to accept that. So I've had line managers where you couldn't change them. And I think sometimes you just have to accept that, look, God gave you certain abilities and maybe this is not it.
Great. Very insightful. We have a hand that has been raised by Alex Karakuza. Alex, I've allowed you to speak. As we wait for Alex to speak, there is a question here touching on adaptability, you mentioned about making sure that our business environment, to make sure that the strategies we have in place can be able to sustain our businesses for longer. So as HRs and people who develop this strategy, how then do we remain adaptable to the changing business environments and needs? Back to you, David.
Good. I think it's a big one. And the first way I'd say is don't sit in your office, right? A lot of us enjoy these big offices, as you can see mine is. You want AC, you stay here, you sign things, and you miss what's going on outside in the world. So it's important to keep yourself informed. You're a business leader in a HR role. So what's the environment saying? So for example, recently the central bank dropped its, the central bank lending rate. If I think about when they talk about our customer scores and they have reduced or, they have gone down or they have gone up, do I go to the branch and see what's happening there? Do I go to some of my delivery centers and let's say, look, my business banking relationship managers or my corporate relationship managers? Do I get insights where people just, where people talk to you like you are at a, in if it's Swahili word, I think you are in the local, right? And they tell you what's going on. They tell you the truth, not what you want to hear, right? If you talk to your fellow HR colleagues, I have some great networks and people, tell me, look, this is what we are thinking, this is what we're experiencing. Go on some customer visits, see what's in the environment. And also listen to your business leaders. A lot of the times we go into these sessions, and that's why I talked about listening. You go to a country leadership meeting and you're just waiting for your turn to speak. Everything else is passing, you're busy revising your presentation. How do you think about what is everyone saying that makes sense? Is that a risk? Is that an opportunity? Have I understood that? And I've found that because of that curiosity, many meetings I go for, I learn more than I came with. Instead of saying, I have to go there, it is this meeting, I must show up and really be powerful and present. I'm going to learn, I'm going to listen. When I meet people, I'm learning and listening from them. Then also sometimes in your own private time, doing courses like finance for non-finance, those things matter. I think they start to tell you, how do I become a business leader in a HR role versus just a HR leader running HR? And once they talk about anything outside my department, I switch off.
Great. Allow me to take this opportunity to recognize Madam Kurecha for joining us. Grace, if at all you have a question from your end, as we wind up the session. Grace? All right. It's like Grace network is not very okay.
Okay.
Yes, Grace.
Yeah, my network kind of misbehaved.
Great. Now we can hear you.
Yes.
Any comment, question from your end?
No question, but really, I'm really grateful. David, you have really enlightened us. And I think the HR professionals or business owners who are logged in tonight have something to really ponder on for the week and decide what they really want to do with their business. And thank you very much. I think for me, it's mostly gratitude and really appreciate the audience who tuned in for this webinar. And of course, for you, Kevin, thank you very much for stepping in. And Catherine Sidandi as always. And I hope you have informed the people to join our WhatsApp group to be aware of what is coming up. Next week, we are discussing funding. So you can call out on anyone who ever wanted to start an NGO, because we have somebody who will teach us about how to resource mobilize for institutions. That is the discussion next Tuesday. But for now, mine is just to say thank you, David. You are such a powerhouse, my God. I am glad that I have your direct line. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace. You're very kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And appreciate the invite.
Thank you. Thank you. We should definitely pick another topic for you, for sure.
Okay,
Most
thanks.
definitely. Yes, Mr. David, your parting shot.
My parting shot, I think it's a journey. So whoever is on the call, whether it's a business, whether it's you're a HR leader, you're starting out, you're in a difficult position, it's a journey. Enjoy it and live a little. I think a lot of the time we are in a straight jacket. I must get it right or bust. But half the time you discover that it is not that. You know, even your most critical board meeting or that paper you have to present tomorrow, it's just that. I think being able to be more kind to ourselves and giving ourselves time to learn, and then setting goals to learn those things is what has allowed me to be here. I've also had some very great mentors. I see some of them commenting here. Some people who have led me. Use them. You forget what a platform you have because you're seeing the future and forgetting where you are now. I think that's really, really it. So, but otherwise, it's really a pleasure, Kevin, and thank you for holding the space for me. You've really done a fantastic job.
Thank you so much, Mr. David. On behalf of Get It Right with Atara, we are grateful, we are honored, and we are privileged to have you and just to tap into your knowledge and also get to understand from your experiences and expertise. We have been very much we've learned a lot. We've actually learned quite a lot today. And out of everything you've said, communication has come out very strongly. Communication of the strategies, both from the HR, from the management, that is from the organization, and also just to allow everyone within the organization to understand the strategies and the path that we are taking. We thank you, Catherine Sidanthi, for always being with us and making sure that we are inclusive. I thank the Get It Right with Atara team for always working behind the scenes to make sure that our viewers have and get the right information at the right time. So if you are on this call and have not joined our WhatsApp group, kindly join our WhatsApp group, Get It Right with Atara Solution. Follow our Facebook page, Get It Right with Atara Solution. Our YouTube channel, Get It Right with Atara Solution. And also our Instagram page, Get It Right. Today's co-host was none other than Kevin, for myself. And I was standing in for Grace and Zula, who is our moderator of choice, and also the director to Get It Right with Atara Solution. With those few remarks, we thank you all, and we are looking forward to be hosting you next week, same time, same place. Thank you all.